Perfect. Beautiful. Thanks, Linnell. Hey, and good morning, everybody. So I am Lisa Dunning with EPA Region 7, and I am currently standing in the Pollution Prevention Coordinator role while Andrew Wynn is on a detail. Yep, and so today we're going to be diving a little bit more into environmental justice and pollution prevention. And as Doug had mentioned, we have two pollution prevention grant opportunities open right now through EPA. And actually the first link in the meeting agenda is to those grant RFA announcements. So if you would like to learn more about those grants, that link is in there. And actually a lot of the resources I'm talking about today, they are hyperlinked again in this agenda. And so if you have any issues accessing those, please let me know, or reach out to the Roundtable leadership, and we're happy to make sure that you have these links and all of these resources. So great. And so again, so we have these two P2 grants out there right now, and as a part of this, and also as a part of the current administration's priorities, environmental justice is a focus area, and trying to be addressed across all federal agencies and things. And so kind of moving this a little bit further, there is a new tool that came out that is the EJ, or the P2 EJ facility mapping tool. And so this is a mapping tool. It pulls in RCRA data and things like that. And there's different layers to this map to be able to identify facilities that are near EJ communities, and also with the layers of the national emphasis areas that the pollution prevention program looks into, such as food, manufacturing, and aerospace. So it's a map that kind of pulls together all these layers. It's a very new tool, and there is a demo that is coming out where the folks that created the tool walk through it. And actually, just this morning, I received a link to the demonstration. So I'm going to be following up with Linnell and seeing if we could put that link in the notes that go out, if we do have notes that go out. But when I'm done speaking, I'll also put it in the chat too, just so that folks have it. So we'll try a couple different ways to get it to you. But so there's a link of the demonstration of the P2 EJ mapping tool. And oh, yep, thanks for the thumbs up. Cool. Yep, and eventually it'll also be posted on the EPA website. So I've actually, I've reached out a little bit, just trying to figure out when this would be published on the website. And so we actually have a little bit of a head start here. So we have a link to the demo before it's actually published on the website, but it's coming really soon. But that being said, you guys get the link early. So great. And so moving on to the next resource available. So the EPA Environmental Justice, or EJ website, that's also a really great place that has just a lot of different information. And so that's in this list of resources. The next resource is also an executive order. And speaking of getting additional resources to you, so I'm going to send you the link to the P2 mapping tool, but also I'm going to send you a second executive order. So the one that is currently in the lineup of the resources list in, again, the agenda, that executive order is on advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities through the federal government. However, the second one that I want to send you specifically addresses the Justice 40 initiative. And so the Justice 40, just for your awareness, that's a goal of 40% of benefits from federal investments will flow to disadvantaged communities. So these two executive orders, they just came out in January of 2022, I believe. Actually, one of them might have been 2021, sorry, but they're pretty recent. And so that's kind of just to give you a little bit of context of where the administration is with these. So those are just two executive orders to help give a little bit of context. The next resource in the list is that you can sign up for an environmental justice listserv. And so that link should be able to point you to how to sign up if you're interested in receiving more information on a regular basis. And then finally, in that list, there are a couple points of contact. So as soon as I'm finished speaking, Heather Collins from EPA Region 7 will be speaking to us today. She is the Environmental Justice Coordinator. And so thank you very much, Heather, for stepping in today. And so her email is provided here. We also have Monica Espinoza, who is the section chief of the section that works with EJ as well. So thank you, Monica, for being on today as well, the community section. And also, in case you need it, I provided the National Environmental Justice email address, and then finally my email as well. And so I'm happy to take any questions if there are any, but then otherwise I will start preparing slides for Heather. But any questions?
And Lisa, if you just send me those links to the executive order and everything, I'll make sure it goes in the notes that we post. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Great. Thank you, Heather. I see that you're on, so I'm going to stop putting, I'm going to stop my camera and I'm going to put up the slides. So here we go.
All right. Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to be able to present what environmental justice means to everyone, not just on the EPA, but just overall on an overarching stems. And this presentation will be shared with Monica Espinoza. And let me introduce myself. And Lisa, what I'll do, since you're going to be sharing the screen, I'll also close my camera just in the case for any stats. For technology reason. So, all right, let me go ahead and do. All right, there we go. Thank you. My name is Heather Collins, and I am the EJ program coordinator for our environmental community section, and I'm on a detail with Monica Espinoza. And so working on that to just kind of just starting the more the conversational purpose as to what environmental justice stands for and mean to everyone. I've worked with EPA for almost 6.5 years. However, prior to my employment with EPA, I've been with the Army Corps of Engineers as a civil engineer and project manager. So doing quite a few details and doing quite a few work, especially the latest one was in Japan. And so I truly wanted to say thank you, everyone, and welcome and good morning. And I'm going to give Monica a quick minute to introduce herself before she go ahead and present some of the slides after I present. Monica.
Thanks, Heather. I was just giving my dog a treat so he wouldn't be barking during the Good morning, everyone. Thanks for inviting us. So as Heather mentioned, and Lisa, thank you also for coordinating and adding us to your agenda. I'm the acting section chief. That includes EJ and environmental education and children's health. And as we know, environmental justice is a huge focus of the new administration. And yes, there are at least 3 different executive orders that relate to EJ and or equity. So I know Lisa mentioned when they came out, most of them came out last January 2021, actually, right at the beginning of the new administration. So we will include a little bit more info about that. This is really going to be kind of a broad overview. Heather will do the first part. I'm just going to go quickly over EJSCREEN, which is one of the tools that we refer different both community groups, state, federal, local governments when they're looking to better work and serve in communities with EJ concern. So I'm going to turn back over to Heather, but I've been at the agency a little over 20 years and learning something new every day, and appreciate everybody's time today. And we really also want to hear from you all and get ideas how EJ can better partner and work with the P2 communities and all the great work you all do. Thanks.
Thank you, Monica. And thanks, Lisa. Thanks, everyone. Okay, so as we dived in and just wanted to give you guys a quick minute to just really look at the pictures that is on the slide and just really say to yourself, what is environmental justice and what does it mean to you? Next slide, please. Historically, thanks. Historically, the system of injustice have been embedded within the laws, policies, and practices throughout the structure of the government and its system. We all know that. So these systems of injustice have had a long and lasting effects on people of color and low-income populations. However, some of these examples on this picture shows the equality, equity, and justice, and the defining the examples of systematic injustice, how it is included. The practice of redlining, which led to the segregation of people of color into the most polluted areas of towns and cities, the sites and facilities and industries that emitted the high level of pollution and toxic near communities of colors, prohibiting the access of home loans and other unfair housing practices, lack of access of good schools, hiring practices of teachers, lack of voting rights, and voting suppression. And there are many, many more that we can list further down as to what the historical disputation of environmental justice and the equality and equity and injustice stands for. But many of the results of these systematic injustice remains and have created disproportionate impacts on these communities. We will cover more about these disproportionate impacts over the next few slides. But the graphic of the right represents the different ways that these injustices have been addressed. So for example, under equality, the assumption is that everyone benefits from the same support. But in our society, where certain populations and communities have been oppressed, we obviously have different needs to achieve equality. As you can see on the graphic under equality, each person has the same size step, but this means the shortest person still can't see over the fence to watch the game. This is where many communities within our environmental justice concerns still stands. Under equity, you can see that everyone gets the support they need. So everyone can see over the fence, right? And watch the game. But the reason or barrier for the inequality has not addressed the issue or removed the issues. But under justice, the fence that was blocking the view is replaced with a fence that everyone can see through. Thus, the cause of equity is addressed and the systematic barrier has been removed. It is this section where EJ advocates, and we advocate so much to focus on their work, on removing systematic barrier. Equity options are still necessary and important, but it is critical that we identify and address and underlining reasons for the injustice. Note the graphic that we have on this PowerPoint slide. Because true equity and justice would actually mean everyone could afford a ticket to the soccer game and be seated comfortably inside the stadium. So it's really, it's an area of what do we look at and how do we define these three stages of environmental justice: equality, equity, and justice. And the funny to caveat on this picture, when I showed my 13-year-old, she's like, "Mom, you look like the little kid," because I'm short, I'm 5'1". So she's like, "You look like the one that stands in the yellow shorts and white t-shirt." And I was like, wow, interesting. But as we can see, it's not just only the height, it's just how equality and equity and justice pertains within our community. Next slide, please. Excuse me. So what is EJ community? It is very important to understand that the term EJ community is a shorthand for communities with EJ concerns. We do not label these communities as EJ communities per se, as this is up to each community to determine. However, do we use that shorthand term at times to describe the communities? We do. However, we also have to depart ourselves and not just use that terminology as EJ community. It is communities with EJ concerns. And that is an environmental justice concern that we have to move away from that idea or the systematic oppression of what an EJ community means. In general, people who live, work, and play and pray in most polluted environments are commonly people of color and low income. These communities suffer from disproportionate impacts for 4 categories of stress. And as it's shown in the bar chart, in the chart, in the graphic on the right, as you can see, the 4 intersecting categories of stress are environment, health, economic, and social. These impacts are often the results of generation of systematic racism and de-investing in these communities. As we spoke to as we're going to speak on previous slides, in addition, these communities have often have poor access of information and experience of lack of meaning in public participation. When conducting the analysis or screening, which we will talk more about when it comes to the the communities with EJ concerns, it is important to understand that environmental issues are part of a larger system that can contribute towards disproportionate impacts. Next slide, please. Excuse me. Now that we have covered some of the basic tenets of environmental justice and EJ communities, let's look at the history of what EJ and EPA how it started. In 1992, the Office of Equity was created based on the recommendation of Environmental Equity Work Group that has been formed at the agency. However, on 1994, that was when Bill Clinton signed the EO, which is the Executive Order 12898, titled the Federal Action to Address Environmental Justice in Minority Populations and Low Income Population. But the purpose of this bill was to focus on federal attention on the environment and human health effects on federal actions on minorities and low income population with the goals of achieving environmental protection for all communities. Along with the EO 12898 in 1994, the Office of Equity expanded and became the Office of Environmental Justice. That is how we started. A lot of the substantive groundwork was done over the next 15 years. And one of our major milestones occurred in 2020 to 2016, when the plan of EJ 2014 was created and implemented. This document was a foundation of integrating EJ in EPA programs, policies, and activities. EPA definition of environmental justice covers 2 core principles. The first principle is fair treatment, and the second principle is meaningful involvement. The principles of environmental justice asserts that no people, based on their race, economic status, should be forced to bear a disproportionate burden of environmental risk. Next slide, please. So moving forward and looking at what we established from 2020 to 2016, and now with our new administration, there are 2 executive orders, which is the Equity Across Federal Agencies and the Justice 40. This Lisa mentioned earlier in the presentation before the meeting started was the Justice 40, and she will provide that link. However, I can go into a little bit detail about what the Equity Across Federal Agencies. It is implementing the executive order, and it's where it's advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities throughout the federal government. The Justice 40 is tackling the climate crisis at home and abroad, and looking at how it affects areas within environmental justice. Next slide, please. Taking a look at this picture and identifying the disproportionate impacts and how it relates to our community within ourselves and just outside, not just only where we work, but on a personal level. And just identifying just the smallest thing is what this are part of a impact within environmental justice. So let's talk a little bit more about disproportionate impacts. There are several factors that could indicate a need to analyze whether disproportionately high environmental impacts exist in communities, right? They may include factors such as some of the pictures have shown. I'm not going to go through too many of the pictures, but just kind of look at the multi and the cumulative effects, the unique exposure pathway, like the underground storage tank, and for the groundwater supplies within communities that may not be aware of what's going on. We have a lot of land that has been built with houses or communities on top of underground storage tank that is still there. And so the remain of contamination will seep into groundwater. The vulnerability of physical infrastructures that is consistently around us that pollutes the air. And we'll talk a little bit more of one of our site visits that we just went to, Monica and I, and a few of our senior managers that went to last Friday and visited some of the communities. And then just to kind of really think it in our mind exactly how this affects and how long this has been going on, just by looking at the disproportionate impacts that are simple, but it is very effective, and which is causing the environmental justice within our communities. The disproportionate impact of the communities may result from combination of several of these, even all, because a lot of communities may have all of these impacts within their community and they're not aware. It's just a seamless, it's just a way of living. And even more, one or two of these factors could, and for themselves, disproportionately expose a population to environmental harms and risk. And so when we're conducting our work at EPA, it is critical to be able to view communities with environmental justice concerns through the wider lens, with multiple stressors creating disproportionate impacts. Doing this will help to inform our decisions and policies with justice for these communities in mind. Fortunately, using an EJSCREEN tool can help to gather data on many of these factors to help inform our work. We will go deeply, Monica will explain more about what the EJSCREEN tool means and how we, as EPA, utilize that EJ screening tool to identify areas within our communities. Next slide, please. Environmental justice at EPA. We looked at environmental justice at EPA because it has come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. We need all hands on deck. We need not just EPA, not just a lot of other federal agencies. We need you guys, our stakeholders. We need communities. We need industries, agencies, the private sectors. We need everyone to come on deck and to help lead this effort. We have a national cross-cutting EJ program consisting of staff from the Office of Environmental Justice and dedicated EJ coordinators and other support staff from regions and national programs. So with the Office of EJ, Environmental Justice provides leadership for the development of EJ strategic plans and annual EJ reports. NAMN and reports where we manage EJ grants, where we'll talk a little bit more about those, the technical assistance leading the NEJAC, which consists of the national, the acronym is the National Environmental Justice Advisory Council. We also utilize the EJ Interagency Work Group and managing EJSCREEN tool and EJ Hotline. Dedicating EJ staff in our region and within our national programs, we coordinate EJ across all organizations within the region and program and provide leadership on EJ issues in all forum and discussions. They support and convey the meaningful engagement among colleagues partners, stakeholders, just like now, like what we're doing in the communities within EJ issues. And we build the capacity by providing consultant services and colleagues to increase the awareness and the understanding of EJ. Next slide, please. So what is EJ environmental justice at EPA? The goals, what are some of our goals? So for the EJ program, our work continues to be focused on EJ integration of EPA, and our goals include the consideration of EJ in all of EPA decisions and policies, using existing statutory authorities and through other non-statutory means. That doing EJ standards practice in all we do at EPA, that communities with EJ concerns are meaningfully engaged and receive fair treatment and justice, and that there are improved environmental and public health outcomes in communities with EJ concerns. Again, one of our mechanisms to reach these goals as an agency is through the use of our EJSCREEN tool. The rest of the presentation will be dedicated to reviewing what this tool is and what it can do further for future EJ work. Next slide. And to explain more about the EJ screening, I will have Monica Espinosa talk more about this presentation. Monica, you're on mute if you're speaking.
Thanks, Heather. Lisa, I wanted to do a quick time check because I wanted to make sure we have time for discussion, and also let you know I'm not the EJSCREEN expert and I'm going to run through these very quickly. But Lisa, can you give us a quick time check? Because I really want to make sure we have time for discussion to hear from you all, because really this is probably a refresher for many of you since EJ has been around a long time, and it's part of a national and actually international movement as well. So Lisa, can you give us a quick time check, please? Thanks.
So I believe we have about 30 minutes left. And so Doug, Linnell, Bruce, if you guys are okay with it, do you want to do a quick run through of the EJ screen?
I will be very quick, or we can skip it, but we wanted to at least give you the slides for future reference because that just got updated to a new version that includes more climate indicators. So 5 minutes?
Yep,
Yes,
that'd be great.
please.
Okay. All right. I'm going to cruise through this. Next slide, please. So maybe in the chat or by a show of hands, how many of you have heard of and or used EJSCREEN? This is a web-based GIS tool for consistent EJ screening and mapping. Anybody? I know there's probably a lot. Yeah, thumbs up. Give me a wave. Yeah, all right, good. So I think I can cruise through this pretty fast. So again, this is really one of the most nationally consistent tools we have. There used to be a lot of different ones in different states. And just a few years back, this was made kind of the national tool that many, like I said, agencies, not just EPA, but also nonprofits use this when they do grant write-ups. But really, it's about combining that environmental and demographic data to highlight, again, like Heather was saying, those historic, most vulnerable populations, whether it's low income and or people of color communities, rural or urban. And again, we're looking at the intersection of the demographics with the environmental data. So those disproportionately impacted or potentially impacted, that's what we're focusing on when we do the EJSCREEN. Next slide. So again, there's a lot of key features. I think there's 12 EJ indices now, or indexes. A lot of it's updated. A lot of stuff comes from the Census Bureau. A lot of accessibility. Things are being addressed now, so it's a lot more easy for people to use. It's definitely still web-based, but you can download. They talked about an app, but I think there was just too much information to put it on the app currently. Next slide. So again, when you all are doing your P2 work, and working with different groups, sometimes this might be helpful for you to look at, like I said, the climate related indicators, look at what are the different facilities that are in different neighborhoods in the areas you serve. And maybe you can start to target or focus on rather the communities that are the most vulnerable, that are most disproportionately impacted based on this data. So you can add shapes around places where there's rivers, for example, or as Heather was talking about, underground storage tanks, where there might be old abandoned gas stations, as well as Superfund sites. So a lot of good information. Next slide. And those are new features. Of course, like any tool, there are limitations and caveats. And again, this is not the end all be all. This is just a data informed tool. This is not the end all be all. We encourage you all to go out in the communities. Sometimes in rural communities and small, the census data might not be as accurate. So I know we've been partnering with Region 6 in Dallas on a tool that uses Click software. I think it's QLIC, LLIK. I'm definitely not a database person, but they're doing a lot of things there in Region 6 to help with especially more ag and rural communities. So stay tuned for that. That's still a prototype right now. But again, the results should be verified on the ground, like I said, so actually ground truthing, right? And then again, it is not there to identify communities with EJ concern. It's there to serve as a reference of where the potential for higher rates of pollution are, again, in the most vulnerable, right? So again, sometimes you have to definitely get out there and ground truth that the data might still be a little out of date. Next slide. So again, the different types of demographic indicators you can see on the left, you can use this to see what specific ethnicities are there. Maybe you need to have information given out in different languages to better serve the communities that are being negatively impacted by the facilities in their neighborhoods. A lot maybe fence line communities like the one we visited in KCK last week with our regional administrator. Next slide. Again, environmental indicators, you can see we cover air a lot. Air, I think, is covered the most thoroughly, water not, for different reasons related to data. But next slide, you can just see some of the ones related to air. Then, of course, lead paint, RMPs, hazardous waste, NPL, wastewater discharge. Next slide. And again, you get a report automatically generated that includes these bar charts. And for those of you that have probably already seen this, you can compare it nationally, regionally, and via state. And our rule of thumb, the second pearl there is places that are in the 80th percentiles, meaning that 20% of the population has a higher value. That's what we're looking at when we look at areas that might have potential EJ concerns, right? So that's kind of our rule of thumb that we have from EPA headquarters for us when you look at, okay, because we get a lot of questions from all over the different divisions while we're integrating EJ. So let me move on, but that's important to distinguish and note. Next slide. Again, we've got a lot of other tools now out there related to wealth status, languages spoken, population, housing status, education level, as well as income that have been there. Again, parks, schools, churches, hospitals, airports, different other considerations. And then you can also, what's really cool is you can overlay different maps and different kinds of data through EJSCREEN, which is a really cool thing that I know a lot of different groups have been using over the years. Next slide. Again, these are some of the examples of how EPA has been using EJSCREEN over the years. Again, when we do community outreach and engagement, and before, like our regional administrator or other leaders and directors go on site visits with communities, we want to know where are those hot spots, where are the zip codes, where are the places that we need to be doing more engagement, we need to be doing more outreach, we need to see kind of a bird's eye view of some of those different potential issues or real issues on the ground, right? Of course, for enforcement targeting, as well as permitting and NEPA reviews, inspection reports. Again, when we look at grant projects, we want to see, does the data gel with what they're saying, where the needs are greatest in their community and for their application for their project. So I'm sure you all probably use that in your different RFAs as well, or other people might be looking at that data. And then of course, case conclusion data sheet types of reports like that. Next slide, almost done. Yeah, there we go. So again, in a nutshell, I know that we didn't really focus a lot on P2. We've been in demand, as you all can imagine, the last couple of years. We're a really small staff, and we were lucky just to get Heather and a few other people on a temporary assignment to help us out. We've got double the amount of grants this year. I can find that link, or Heather, if you can help me, to the ones we're getting awarded that have been notified already. Some of you probably heard of them across Kansas City, St. Louis, and other parts of the region. So yeah, I'm sure they would love to partner with you. We definitely would love to partner more. And I think the key takeaways I wanted to also mention before I stop and turn it over to you all is think about, in your day-to-day work and your planning and your, like Heather said, your spheres of influence and your partners that you all work with, where can there be more opportunities for capacity building and partnerships with those most vulnerable overburdened and underserved communities, right? You know, is there a need to have more representation of the different communities that need to be at the table that might be missing, right? Who are those leaders in those communities of color and or low income, you know, neighborhood associations, church, school educators. And a lot of the times you can work through your health departments, you can work through your local governments, neighborhood associations to find out who those leaders are, as well as I know a lot of them have Facebook pages. For example, we partnered a lot with the Ivanhoe Neighborhood Council the past decade or so to address the lead poisoning issues in their communities in the eastern portion of Kansas City, Missouri. And we got a lot of great partnerships through their former director, Mrs. Margaret May, who connected us with her different leaders in her neighborhood. So they really helped to reduce the lead poisoning, reduce some of the blight, increase awareness, increase education. And they were focused a lot on, again, reducing, you know, lead paint, but also making people aware and having, you know, knowledge about, you know, when you get a contractor, you're sweeping, you know, not getting that lead dust if your house was built, as many were before 1975. So it's about partnerships. EPA is not the only agency doing EJ. It's across all federal agencies. It's part of a grassroots movement, right? So we are just one of many other players in this huge puzzle. And the goal really is true environmental justice for all: health, economic prosperity, right? Sustainability, better quality of life. So that's what our program's about. We're here to be a resource for all of our divisions and programs and all of you. But we also ask you to be a resource for us because you all are the experts in P2. But we'd love to see more overlap and intersection. And I know with some of these new tools Lisa mentioned, I'm excited about them. It's hard to keep up, right? There's so many things: Justice 40, American Rescue Plan, the bipartisan infrastructure law. So Heather and I are literally just trying to catch our breaths every day with the amount of vast change and focus on EJ and equity. And we can't do it alone. We need your all's support. And again, we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you both very much, Heather and Monica. And really quick, I have not been able to look at the chat, but were there any questions relating to the slides? Because if there were not, then I'm going to stop sharing my screen. But if they were, I can flip to the slide that needs addressing.
I'm sorry, Lisa, I was scanning the chat to look at questions. Can you repeat? Were you asking that to us? I missed it.
Oh, sure. Pretty much just anybody. I haven't been looking at the chat just because I wanted to keep on the presentation. So I was just curious if there were any questions, you know, directly related to the content on a slide, or if I could just stop sharing my screen and start the conversation.
I know there's some questions in the chat. Maybe we could talk about those or get some conversation would be my suggestion.
Sounds good. Then I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I can always start sharing it again if needed. Perfect. All right, great. So I'm not exactly sure how we want to do this, but I'll start looking through the chat here and seeing if there's any questions that have not been addressed. But if anybody has anything while I'm just starting to, you know, get up to date on the chat, I guess.
Yeah,
Well, Lisa, I'll start with the
ahead,
first
Jim.
question that I see, and that's from Gene Waters. Do you have priority EJ projects in Region 7?
I'll answer that, and then Heather, feel free to jump in. Oh, yes. EJ itself is a big priority. So all the projects we're working on, seriously, more enhanced community engagement planning, double the amount of grants. That's a priority of EJ grants. So those have been two big things, but enhanced, we're hearing definitely from our administration, enhanced community engagement, EJ integration across all of our programs. Many of our programs have been doing that even before the last administration, as Heather mentioned, in the Plan EJ 2014 arena in the 2010s or so, 2011, 2012, 2013. There have been different initiatives that have focused on EJ over the years, making a visible difference in communities. We have our community-driven solutions kind of initiatives. So again, we are working on better targeting or focusing on through EJSCREEN and other data, and working with our states too on where are some of those communities, especially in rural and ag. So that's a big focus. We don't have specific projects just yet, Jean, besides like, again, the grants, doing community engagement. Our new regional administrator is doing a lot more site visits now, as are many of the administrators in different regions, and our administrator, Michael Regan of EPA, has been doing some in the South. Recently, his Journey to Justice tours. So I would say community engagement, a lot more funding with communities, focused on EJ concerns to address. People want actions, not just listening sessions and talking about it. They really want to get more into, all right, let's partner and work together. So again, partnering, that's a big project, partnering across our federal families with HHS, with HUD, USDA, FEMA, et cetera. There's a lot of things going on. So I would say the biggest priority is getting our own house in order, getting our program more capacity to address all these different needs and requests we're getting. But definitely rural community engagement, and then the different funding sources, getting to those most overburdened and underserved through initiatives like Justice 40. Thanks.
Okay, the next one kind of relates to this a little bit. Have there been any recent EJ grant projects in Region 7 that could possibly intersect with the work we typically do in P2 technical assistance, which is providing technical assistance to businesses? Is there a link to those past projects and results? That's from Linnell Ladd in Kansas.
Thanks, Jim. Yes, Linnell, like I said, I didn't have time because I was about to speak and my dog was barking, so pardon that. But yeah, I'm sure there are different projects. I don't know if you want ones that are still existing, like current, or just grantees to look that have already done projects that, you know, like you said, past project. There is a way to do a search by state for EJ grants, like through, you know, Kansas, Iowa, Nebraska, Missouri. I don't know any off the top of my head that I can say, yes, absolutely. But for example, I know, like I said, we're in the process of, in the final stages of getting 8 new EJ grants, 6 small and 2 collaborative problem solving in the region. So I'm sure there are definitely overlaps with pollution prevention. And I'll just say this too, from recent conversations we had in one of our communities with nonprofits and community leaders in KCK. They had a lot of issues. They have a lot of issues related to air quality because they're by the rail yards. There's also a lot of manufacturing type of small, but I'm sorry, not manufacturing, but like automobile, trucking kinds of industries, tires, metal. What was it called, Heather? Like recycling. So they're
Metal, yeah.
metal from old cars, and the exhaust and the smoke is just right there down the street from a daycare. You know, so there's still these kinds of you know, disproportionate impacts in mostly Latinx communities there, just as an example. And I think that community definitely could use some assistance, not that they're not smart in doing things, but with the industry could use assistance with better engaging that community is where I'm going. So kind of flipping it, the businesses in those areas, that's where we got feedback. You know, they want to make sure they're doing their fair share, and they're abiding by the rules, right, and the different regulations. So I think that's a huge opportunity as an example. But we can get you that link, Lynette, where you can do a search by state. So I'll look for that in a minute if you want to keep going, Jim. I got to mute. Heather, can you answer the next?
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just wanted to get maybe clarification on that, and if Monica may be the one that needs to give me that clarification, but was she talking about like a salvage yard, perhaps, like a place where they're, you know, bringing in junk cars and you know, smashing them down and
Yes.
and all of that? Okay,
Mhm.
because we're thinking about that as a potential project in our SB work. So, you know, kind of we've done outreach in Kansas before with that industry type, and there is some pollution concerns there, definitely. What I was kind of looking for, just to clarify on my question real quick, you know, I was looking at, you know, if there's any EJ grant work that has done some, you know, actual sampling, monitoring in the communities that resulted in results that, you know, could be maybe, you know, linked to industrial activity in the area where we could go come in with our technical assistance. That's kind of the connection that I'm looking for. So that was my kind of
Linnell, what state are you out of, or what organization are you with?
I'm with K-State Pollution Prevention Institute, and we are in Kansas. So we are
Okay.
a current P2 grantee, and of course we'll go for these grants. But we'd like to be able to make the best use of this money. And by, by identifying, if there are, we had some information come to us, and maybe Nancy could clarify from our regulatory agency, said that there was some recent monitoring in the KC Metro that was identifying ultrafine PM, and that is a concern. So if that has occurred and who did that, I'm trying to get that information wherever I can get it from, whether that was EPA monitoring, KDHE monitoring, some independent monitoring. I'd like to get my hands on that data and identify where that came from.
Okay,
If you're
from what
aware
I-
of it, please
From
pass
what I
that
know,
on.
sorry, Lena. From what I know both our air division, I don't know the state's involvement, but I know our air division has done all kinds of air monitoring over the years. But like in that specific area, they had a big KC tracks. I forget the acronym. Jim or Lisa or Heather could help me. That I know we can find a link and post that on there. I know they had air monitors, and they had interaction with, again, a lot of the community in Argentine, Armourdale and Turner in KCK. And then I know Clean Air Now, they had a grant with us probably about 7 years ago. It was a diesel health project, but Clean Air Now was a partner. So that's who's been talking with us the most. They issued a report called Environmental Racism in the Heartland recently with the Union of Concerned Scientists. So we've definitely been, our regional administrator is, listening and met with them when we were there last week. So just throwing those out, but definitely our air program. I'm trying to think, we could get you in contact there. Cody Brown or Stephen Brown, but he goes by Cody, is one of our main EJ air contacts in the region who worked on that KC tracks, technical research, air quality system or something like that. We can get you a link. I think that might be useful. Anybody else from EPA want to jump in on that?
And I was going to say, there is some connection with those DERA, those Diesel Emission Reduction Act and grants and funding. And we definitely know that in the Kansas City area, especially with the intermodal that we have south of Johnson County or in southern Johnson County, that is certainly an impact too. There are other rural areas that are being impacted by PM. And I know KDHE is starting to look and turn their monitors that way. I didn't know if there was citizen science maybe that Linnell was referring to, or if there was citizen science, does that get logged in some way?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to how we log citizen science since I'm not in the air program, but like I said, we have a designated team that we recently created. We've had it informal for years, but and Cody Brown is our main air contact for our new EJ action team. So we can get with him and follow up because I know he works closely with the DERA grants and also knows a lot more about citizen science than I do in terms of air quality and PM. So we can get back, Lisa, if you can help us remember, I'm writing down some notes from Linnell, and also Nancy, what state or what organization are you in? You look familiar.
I've been around a long time, Monica. We probably worked together on some other stuff. I'm Nancy Larson, K-State Pollution Prevention Institute.
Okay.
So we have the Kansas Small Business Environmental Assistance Program with KDHE and
Okay, great.
pollution prevention.
Yeah, we'll have to definitely, there's so many things and I failed to acknowledge, but we recently had the passing of our #1 EJ advocate for over 25 years. Althea Moses passed away just 2 weeks ago. So we're still grieving. She was a huge loss to the whole region and the country in terms of justice. She was an engineer who had solid waste background. Jim knew her, Lisa knew her, me and Heather. We love her a lot and we miss her. I'm just being blunt that she really was one of our main contacts that knew all these different networks. We do have some state EJ contacts we want to work with more through like KDHE, Missouri DNR, et cetera. But a lot of people are looking to us right now. We're popular again, and they really want to know, like you're saying in the chat, like what are the measures? How do we, know when we've addressed EJ, the outcomes? And I'll tell you, Jean, it's not easy. We've got our measures through our EJ grants. We've got measures being done nationally through the strategic plan. That goal 2 is all about advancing equity and justice and civil rights. So, you know, in terms of the measurements, we have a lot of short-term things that we have with our grants and some of the types of outreach we do. Like I said, we're doing a lot more community engagement since COVID in the last administration, right? But the measurements, there's going to be long-term performance goals that are going to be tied to all of the goals related to air, water, you know, solid waste, P2, Superfund, all of those are coming out. All of our national performance programs are coming out with EJ strategies. So, you know, we're kind of waiting. We're not waiting. We have our own strategy, right? And that's about capacity building, community engagement, you know, grants, training, outreach, right? But rest assured, there's going to be a lot more measurement on EJ outcomes. And we really want to focus not only getting, like in the Justice 40 initiative, there's those 6 pilot areas like in brownfields and related to water infrastructure and others. But we also really want to have those tangible environmental benefits to those most overburdened communities, right? So that's been a big issue or effort to how do we measure just that 40%, right, of benefits. It's not creating a grant program, it's existing programs. So there's a lot going on. Stay tuned. I would definitely look at the new EPA strategic plan goal 2, because there's 3 sub-objectives under that. It's all about EJ. It's all about measures. And I'm still learning, Jean. So thanks for your patience with me. Next question, Jim. I think it's from Jean as well.
Yeah, just a sec.
If you want, I can get this one. So from a traditional P2 technical assistance perspective, would you say that a project that focuses delivery of pollution prevention assistance to businesses in an EJ community and includes community engagement and or eco recognition or something with the project be of interest? Just a hypothetical.
Absolutely. Yes. I think there's a huge need to connect the industrial and some of those smaller businesses, right? Maybe, you know, we have inspectors that do some of the bigger generating facilities inspections, but in states, of course, but the, and Heather and I have to go in a minute to another meeting that we're leading. Imagine that. But can we continue this conversation or maybe some of these emails? Because I know we've got 5 more new messages but I'll just say, yes, absolutely, Jean. Definitely, that would be a great project. I think there's a huge need and interest in better connecting the work you all do with businesses to the communities with EJ concerns to better involve them and get them some of the benefits as well as education and awareness. So absolutely.
Monica, I will also suggest with the questions that's coming through and with the time that we have, if you guys can go ahead and send those to Lisa and we can respond back to her.
That would be great.
That will be great. Yes. And provide any resources that we have that needed prior to some of the questions that was asked.
Yeah, so it looks like we have 2 left. So one is from Bruce, and then I think Nancy was mentioning the salvage yards and things like that. Oh, actually, no. Okay, actually, I think we might have 3. But yes, we can try to work on these. And also, I've been trying to keep a list of the links and the resources that we need to pull together and email out and things. But sounds good. So to be respectful of both of your time, thank you so much. And yeah, so we'll be in touch with just trying to capture these questions and, you know, pinging back and forth and, you know, the intersection between EJ and P2. Yes, and thank you both again very much for your time and for the P2 roundtable for your interest and, you know, getting to further this area. So
thank you for having us, everybody. Yes, if you can help us get those questions, we will definitely get back to you all, and let's definitely keep in touch because we need your assistance as well as you need ours, and we can help clarify some of those ones that you all had, Bruce and others. So, and thanks for your condolences as well. But we honor her every day with the work we do, but also take care of your health because that's important too. We can't be of any benefit to anyone if we're not taking care of our health. So don't be working too hard, too late on the computer, everybody. Thank you all for the great work and thanks for the invitation. Bye.
Thank you everyone for the invitation and ditto to everything that Monica said. So let's continue this conversation that we have. It's gonna be a great couple of years. So let's make an impact within our communities. Thanks.
So, hey, Linnell, if you would stop the recording, I'm gonna stay on just for a little bit and just